Introduce Eleanor Hale, a brilliant but overworked young CEO of a billion-dollar tech company, who suddenly collapses from a rare and fatal blood disease. Doctors and specialists worldwide try to save her, but hope begins to fade. Introduce Jack Carter, a humble single dad and decorated war veteran, who quietly works long hours to provide for his young daughter. His past is marked with scars of war, but his spirit remains unbroken. When all donors fail, Jack's rare blood type becomes the only hope to save Eleanor. A tense hospital scene unfolds as his blood transfusion miraculously stabilizes her. Their worlds, once miles apart, suddenly collide. Eleanor recovers, but more than her body begins to heal. She sees in Jack the strength, humility, and heart that her world of power and wealth never gave her. Jack's daughter brings unexpected warmth into Eleanor's life. The city never truly slept, especially not beneath the towering glass fortress of Hale Tech. From a distance it looked like a monument of progress, each illuminated floor a beacon of ambition. But on the top level, inside an office large enough to hold dreams and exhaustion in equal measure, Eleanor Hale sat alone. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, her eyes locked on cascading lines of data that reflected off her glasses. She was 32, brilliant, and feared by competitors who whispered that she was made of steel. Yet in the stillness of that night, the glow from the screens cast shadows under her eyes that told another story entirely. The hum of the air conditioner was the only companion to the rhythmic tapping of her keys. Outside her window the city glimmered like circuitry, but she hardly noticed. She had deadlines, investors, and the unrelenting drive of someone who believed rest was weakness. For years she had lived by a simple mantra: work harder than anyone else, and nothing can break you. But the human body does not bargain with determination. As the clock struck midnight, she felt a dull ache at the base of her skull. She brushed it aside, reaching for another cup of cold coffee. The ache turned to pressure, then to a stabbing pain that made her wince. She blinked rapidly, trying to refocus on the merger proposal glowing on her screen, but the numbers began to swim. Her chest tightened. The pen slipped from her fingers. A strange chill washed over her as if the world had tilted slightly. "Not now," she whispered, but the words barely escaped her lips before darkness surged through her vision. She collapsed to the floor, the faint sound of her watch beeping as her pulse plummeted. Security found her minutes later. The ambulance lights cut through the night like slashes of red hope, but by the time she reached the hospital, her life hung by a thread. The news spread faster than the doctors could stabilize her. Eleanor Hale, tech visionary and billionaire CEO, in critical condition. The headlines flooded social media. Her employees wept in the lobby of Hale Tech, some praying, some whispering fears of the company's future. Yet inside the hospital room, there was no Empire, only a frail young woman pale against white sheets, tubes and wires mapping the fragile rhythm of a failing heart. The doctors murmured in low voices. "It's a rare form of autoimmune blood degeneration," said Dr. Stein, her lead physician. "We can slow the collapse, but unless we find a perfect genetic match, she won't survive more than a week." Teams were dispatched worldwide. Donor drives launched across states, but each test returned the same result: incompatible. Eleanor's blood was an exceptionally rare variant, a combination so uncommon it existed in less than 1% of the global population. The board authorized every expensive private labs. International specialists, but science had its limits. By the fourth day, her skin had turned almost translucent. She drifted in and out of consciousness, whispering numbers and phrases from her work, as if her mind refused to surrender even as her body did. Nurses whispered about miracles. Reporters waited outside the hospital gates. Inside, the doctors watched the monitors fade from hope to resignation. Across the river, life went on as usual in a small apartment where Jack Carter was coaxing his 8-year-old daughter Lily to finish her homework. The television murmured in the background, showing fragments of the same story that captivated the world. But Jack wasn't paying attention. He was focused on Lily, who was drawing stars in the margins of her notebook. Jack was in his late 30s, tall, with shoulders that carried both strength and quiet fatigue. Years in the army had given him discipline, and scars years of fatherhood had given him gentleness. Since losing his wife 3 years earlier, his life revolved around Lily. He worked double shifts at a construction site, came home smelling of dust and concrete, and still found energy to braid his daughter's hair and tell her bedtime stories about courage. That night, as he washed the dishes, he nicked his finger on a broken glass. Lily gasped, rushing to fetch a band-aid. "Daddy, you're bleeding again." Jack smiled softly. "Just a little scratch. Nothing a hero can't handle." She frowned. "You're not a superhero. You're my dad." He laughed and kissed her forehead. "Same thing, kiddo." The next morning, on his way to work, he noticed a large poster at the subway entrance. "Emergency blood donors needed. Save a life today." There was a QR code and a line of people waiting near a mobile donation van. Without a second thought, Jack joined them. When the nurse pricked his arm for the sample, she glanced at the monitor and frowned slightly, then excused herself. Jack waited, puzzled, until two men in white coats approached. "Mr. Carter?" one asked. "Would you come with us, please?" He followed them to a small office where they explained that his blood type was one of the rarest in the world and, more importantly, a perfect match for a patient currently in critical condition. "Her name's Eleanor Hale," said the doctor, the CEO on the news. Jack blinked. "You're kidding." "We're not. She's running out of time. We need your consent immediately." Jack hesitated for only a moment before saying, "If my blood can help, take as much as you need." Within hours, he found himself in a sterile hospital room, a tangle of machines humming around him. On the other bed lay the woman he had seen briefly on TV, though she looked nothing like the polished executive from the headlines. She looked small, almost fragile, her face ghostly white against the pillow. Jack sat quietly as the nurse prepared the transfusion line. The doctor explained the risks of fatigue, dizziness, but Jack waved them away. "I've had worse." As his blood began to flow through the tubes, he glanced at her still face and whispered, "Come on, lady, don't give up now." Time passed in silence, broken only by the soft beeping of monitors. Jack's thoughts drifted to his daughter, to bills unpaid, to memories of the battlefield where he had once watched friends fight for every breath. Something in Eleanor's stillness reminded him of those moments of the thin line between life and loss. After an hour, one of the doctors gasped quietly. The monitors were changing. Her pulse, once erratic, began to steady. Color crept faintly back into her cheeks. "It's working," the doctor whispered. The room filled with cautious excitement. Jack smiled faintly but said nothing. He felt weak, lightheaded, yet profoundly peaceful. He had done what he could. When the transfusion ended, the nurse helped him stand. He looked back at the woman on the bed, unaware that this single act of kindness had just rewritten both their destinies. That night, Eleanor's body responded as if revived by something more than just compatible blood. Her fever dropped, her oxygen levels rose, and for the first time in days, her vitals stabilized. When she awoke 2 days later, the first thing she saw was sunlight streaming through the blinds. Her throat was dry, her voice a whisper. "Where am I?" Dr. Stein smiled with exhausted relief. "You're safe, Ms. Hale. We found a donor. You're going to recover." Eleanor blinked, trying to piece together the fragments of memory of the collapse, the blur of sirens and then the vague recollection of a man's voice, deep and steady, saying, "Don't give up now." "Who?" she croaked. "Who saved me?" The doctor hesitated, then said, "A man named Jack Carter, a veteran. You owe him your life." The words lingered in her mind long after the doctor left. She had spent years surrounded by people who admired her wealth, her intellect, her power, but a stranger had saved her without asking for anything in return. When the board came to visit, talking about contracts and stability, she felt detached from all of it. Her empire suddenly seemed meaningless compared to the miracle that kept her heart beating. Days later, when she was strong enough to stand, she looked out the hospital window and thought about the man whose blood now flowed through her veins. She felt something stir, a humility she hadn't known in years, a desire to meet him, not as a CEO, but as a woman who had been given a second chance. Meanwhile, Jack returned home, pale but proud. Lily greeted him at the door, wrapping her small arms around his waist. "You okay, Daddy?" He smiled. "Just a little tired, sweetheart. I did something good today." "Like what?" "I helped someone get better." She grinned. "Then you really are a superhero." He laughed softly and held her close. That night, he tucked her into bed and stared out the window at the city lights, unaware that somewhere across the skyline, The woman he'd saved was thinking of him too. In the following days, as Eleanor recovered, curiosity turned into determination. She asked the hospital staff for Jack's contact information. At first, they refused for privacy reasons, but eventually, with his consent, a meeting was arranged. When Jack entered her room, he looked uncomfortable in his worn jacket, his hands shoved into his pockets. Eleanor smiled weakly from her bed. "You're Jack Carter." "Yes, ma'am," he said. "Guess we're blood relatives now." The line broke the tension, and they both laughed. She thanked him sincerely, her eyes shining. "You saved my life. I don't know how to repay you." He shrugged. "You don't owe me anything. Just make it count." Their conversation was brief, but something unspoken passed between them, an understanding that life, stripped of titles and riches, was about connection. As Jack left, Eleanor watched him go with a feeling she couldn't name yet. Gratitude, admiration, maybe something deeper. She had spent her life chasing success, yet in that humble man's eyes she had seen more courage and compassion than in all the boardrooms she'd ever ruled. Over the next week, her recovery became front-page news. The world called it a medical miracle, but she knew it was more than science. It was humanity. She decided to launch a new charitable initiative through Hale Tech, one focused on veterans and families in need. When asked by the press what inspired her, she simply said, "A man who reminded me that strength doesn't always wear a suit." Jack continued his ordinary life, though it was no longer quite the same. Letters of appreciation poured in after the story went public, but he remained humble. For him, the true reward was seeing his daughter's proud smile. Yet destiny wasn't finished weaving their paths together. A few weeks later, he received an invitation to an event at Hale Tech at the launch of the new foundation. He almost declined, feeling out of place among the suits and cameras, but Lily insisted. "You have to go, Daddy. She's your friend now." When he arrived, the crowd parted as Eleanor took the stage, radiant in a simple dress, no longer the steel-eyed CEO but a woman reborn. She spoke about kindness, sacrifice, and second chances. Then she spotted him near the back and smiled, a smile that held gratitude and warmth that words could never express. In that moment, Jack realized that the blood flowing between them had done more than heal a body, it had bridged two worlds. That night, as they finally spoke away from the crowd, the city lights shimmering around them, she said quietly, "You didn't just save my life, Jack. You changed it." He looked at her, his expression gentle. Maybe we both needed saving, and though neither knew what the future held, one thing was certain: the story that began with tragedy had become a testament to hope, courage, and the quiet power of kindness.